All right, 3XP, it's great to be here. My name is David Saunders. I'm a principal and lead game investor at RW3 Ventures. We are a early stage blockchain-focused fund investing across the ecosystem from blockchain infrastructure to Web3 consumer products and services, of which gaming is by far our highest conviction thesis. We have a great panel. I'd love to ask the guys here to introduce themselves and give us sort of the background on them and their firms.
I guess we're going in this order?
Yeah.
Bradley Reese. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Checkout.com. Checkout.com is a TradFi company. No booze? Okay, I was waiting for some. We work with Netflix and Meta and Uber, but we also work with a lot of Web3 companies. So when you're putting money into Coinbase or MoonPay, we're very often the back end of organizations like this. So our role is very much back end Rails, but our claim to fame in this audience is that we move more fiat to tokenized currencies than any other company in the world. We also have products that actually leverage blockchain to move our own kind of, again, very TradFi industry forward. For example, using USDC to send remittances globally for zero cost in real time. So genuinely trying to use the right bits of the technology to supplement our business while providing holistic support for the overall ecosystem and moving value on chain.
My name is Abhay, and I run corp dev and investments for MoonPay. MoonPay is a fiat on-ramp. That's where we started our journey. We actually work with Checkout and also Coinbase. Over the last 2 years, we have expanded to an end-to-end Web3 infrastructure company, starting from strategy, ideation, design to technical infrastructure, which is authentication, minting, wallet infrastructure, and then all the way down to the payments rails, which involves the fiat on-ramp pieces and also some native crypto rails. As all of us are trying to do, we are trying to onboard users to Web3 and do it in a simple and scalable manner. We're trying to do stuff that aligns to that vision.
Awesome. Daryl, I look after our gaming and infrastructure partners at Coinbase. And Coinbase, just really high level, we service several parts of the crypto and Web3 ecosystem. The primary product we have is a global exchange and custodian. So we service a few million users on the institutional and retail fronts. And then for developers, we also have a developer platform, Coinbase Cloud, which is a suite of APIs and SDKs to help folks and developers easily add Web3 primitives.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I think we'll start broad and work our way in. Historically, your firms have been the sort of first touch point for retail users entering into the Web3 crypto ecosystem. Obviously this panel is talking about on and off ramps, and this is a Web3 gaming conference, so I'd love to better understand sort of how you guys are envisioning Web3 games integrating with the services that you work for and on and off ramps generally. Whoever wants to answer first.
I'll jump on this one because my answer is going to be shorter than these guys is. We're a web services base, so we don't handle any of the user experience per se. We focus on the rails, but outside of the Web3 companies we work with, we also work with Blizzard and Sony PlayStation. So what we can speak to in those worlds is obviously it is incredibly frictionless. And that's the only thing I'll kind of throw up in the air to start with is that that's always the holy grail of any sort of e-commerce or digital payments experience, be it in Web 2 or Web 3, is to just streamline the process as much as possible without sacrificing security. I'll hand over to these guys there because obviously what they do is focus on a lot more front end and user experience. But what I would say is that that's the gap I see today is obviously even just connecting your MetaMask wallet to a DApp is annoying compared to just looking at your phone to make a transaction with Apple Pay. So there's definitely a clear delta that we need to work towards.
Absolutely. Abhay, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, MoonPay has always been almost a headless product in a way, because our mission has been to integrate and be inside all the wallets, NFT marketplaces and decentralized, centralized exchanges. And through that, it's interesting because there are some analogies with, as Web3 gaming is maturing, there are some analogies and similar playbooks that could be applicable here as well. Now, simultaneously, while Web3 gaming is maturing, the traditional kind of what we call the surface area of what crypto on-ramp looks like that is maturing as well. So when you think about not just buying and selling of, let's say, tokens or cryptocurrencies, there's also questions such as potentially holding balances or holding, merchant kind of fiat balances or custodial wallets or non-custodial wallets. Custodial in the case of, if you want it to be community bound versus non-custodial, which is, depending on the gameplay, I can see both options. But at the end of the day, I think the North Star for us is, we are very deliberate in the way we would work with game publishers. And, at the end of the day, we want to be as abstracted away from the experience and really amplify the gaming kind of gameplay and the calls to actions there.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think the way that we can, at least at Coinbase, help folks out in Web3 gaming, there's a ton of ways because we operate an infrastructure platform. We also have a retail user base. But I think at this specific point in time, the main value we can bring is distribution. And so we have millions of users on our platform that I think have dipped their toes into crypto through the trading use case and essentially have assets on our platform and are familiar with the basics of crypto. And I think myself and my team, we want to help them progress along their crypto journey even further, right? Go deeper into Web3, beyond just the trading use case, things like DeFi, social, marketplaces, and particularly myself, and I'm sure many folks in this audience and this panel, we're bullish on gaming as that use case. And so helping put amazing content and IP in front of our audience, in front of our wallet holders, so that they can engage and essentially start playing these games so we can move past just trading as the speculative use case and crypto having some additional utility. And we're excited about gaming.
Fantastic. I'd love to sort of double click into, and sorry, Bradley, more for Coinbase and MoonPay. I can imagine in the audience there's a fair amount of builders in the Web3 gaming space who obviously are well aware of your brand names. They would love to explore a partnership. I'm sort of curious, are there any particular ways that you'd think about partnering? Is there a specific channel that you would recommend they go to reach out? Is there a stage perhaps that you sort of wait for?
Yeah, and there are two angles for MoonPay, right? One is selfishly through the ventures group, and a lot of times some of the, and this is, I would say, more relevant for gaming infrastructure, at least some of the companies that we are working with. That's more about how do you enable mass distribution of potential infrastructure along with some necessary infrastructure elements that MoonPay provides, like KYC, compliance, whatever it might be, if that's the use case. If the use case is around literally on-ramping or off-ramping, that's another source of natural distribution. So we try and partner with, from an investments perspective, we look at gaming infrastructure players and some really interesting things happening there as part of not only working with them and creating a win-win-win-win for our eventual 15 million consumer base, or a win for the company because we help with the distribution, a win for us because we really gain from the partnership as well. So that's angle one. The second angle is purely think of it as a BD commercial piece, and there's some really interesting things happening there as well, specifically around when we think about reputation and what it means for limiting what reputation means for your on-chain kind of activity, correlating that to something like trust scoring or reputation scoring, which not necessarily doesn't mean you're giving up all the data to the game or the game publisher, and vice versa. It doesn't mean the data from the game publisher is flowing back into us, right? So there's a potential angle there. There's also something interesting we were talking about before, which is this concept of off-chain liquidity bridging with on-chain liquidity, and increasingly, I think the more folks I speak to in Web3 gaming, what is paramount is the UX and the experience, and if the liquidity pool necessarily for the game is off-chain, and selectively bridges on-chain at certain events, that's not too bad. That could be an alternative approach. It doesn't have to be completely decentralized from day one. So MoonPay can provide some interesting kind of solutions there and those bridging alternatives also.
That's great, Daryl. I'd love to get your guys' perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, if we take a quick step back at the state of Web3 gaming and this vertical in particular, I see two high-level barriers to entry. I think one right now is on the technical side. Blockchains, despite the tremendous progress that's been made, it's still a bit too complex, a bit too slow, too many steps involved to onboard, I think, not even a crypto native user, but also someone that maybe falls in the mass casual category, right? And then I think on the commercial side, if you're trying to do something and engage with the Web3 primitive, one example would be conducting an ETH transaction. It's just too expensive right now. And so I think our partnership vision and model is to work with folks that are building amazing content, amazing IP, but also folks that are at the infrastructure layer. I think that's why we have partnerships with, the amazing panelists here. Just folks that are building really awesome, game-specific solutions, and then we can find a way to embed that within the Coinbase developer and the Coinbase user community, and just help grow the industry and take us to, something that will be a bit more adopted in the near future. So something that solves, I think, the technical and commercial barriers to entry, and we're looking to partner with folks of all sorts.
Great, thank you. Daryl, I'd love to just touch on Base. Back at ETH Denver, you announced Base. I'm pretty sure you have the testnet going live, or it is live right now. I think there's a lot of interesting use cases from the Web3 gaming perspective. Would love to just sort of ask you for some color for those in the audience who might not be as familiar with what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So really high level, Base is our L2 that's essentially built on Ethereum, inheriting Ethereum as our security and data availability layer. And we built it in collaboration with Optimism on the OP stack. Our vision for Base, it's bold, but we really think that we have a real shot at this, which is onboarding the next billion users into crypto and on-chain. And on the developer side, onboarding the next million developers to essentially build on Base. And right now we're in testnet, and it's going pretty well. We're heading into mainnet pretty soon, and the idea from there is to have a vibrant and robust ecosystem of applications, DeFi, social marketplaces, all kind of built on Base as a layer 2, which has low cost, high security, and then also to really bootstrap that with the Coinbase user base, right? So we have hundreds of millions of users on the Coinbase platform, and we want to bring them deeper into Web3. And Base is going to be that landing point. Kind of once they come in, we want Base to be essentially a bridge that can connect the various parts of the crypto ecosystem as well. And so once our users come on Base, maybe play a game for the first time, they can also try other applications that are elsewhere in the crypto ecosystem. So it's really meant to be kind of like a connective tissue across the different layers of Web3 and crypto. And we're really excited. We're kind of all in.
Awesome. Yeah, we're all obviously very excited for the mainnet launch. I'd love to touch on a hot topic, obviously this week, which is regulation. But I'm gonna avoid the topic that is obviously top of mind for everyone. The security question is absolutely out there. That's not for this panel. I think what I'd love to touch on, though, is KYC and AML. And I think that's relevant for your guys' positions in the ecosystem. When I look out across a lot of the Web3 gaming companies that are building right now, there is a lot of focus on whether it's classified security and not as much focus on do you know your customer? Or do you have money transmission laws? Do you even have a solution in place? I think obviously your firms are very well positioned in understanding the nuances to that. So I'd love to better understand how important should KYC AML be in the process of building Is it something that should be of high focus? Are there solutions that you can extend and provide? Really anything in that direction. Bradley, do you have any insight here? I don't want to leave you out in the cold.
No, I'd forgotten how to speak, so no, I'm joking. I mean, again, in some ways, KYC is a core part of what, the Coinbase wallet experience will incorporate, the MoonPay wallet experience. There's a reason you do it, and it actually does relate to securities, because everything looked like it could be a security. I mean, Axie Infinity definitely had elements which are securities in there. So you have to KYC a user, and the reason these guys have to, because even though they may be processing payments via checkout, they're touching a regulated rail. So as soon as you're touching any sort of regulated source of financing, i.e. a bank account, a credit card, whatever it may be, if it is a security, there is an onus of knowing who you're doing business with, especially if there's tangible risk of money laundering or terrorism funding, which there always is, especially in something which is potentially international, which of course crypto, like the internet, is by default. That said, while that's kind of the modus operandi, and there's huge value for someone like MoonPay if you KYC a user, because once you have all that information, that's a lot of friction you've just gone through. So now any like DApp or anyone else could actually say, hey, I'm going to hook in MoonPay. They've got this huge existing user base, or Coinbase, obviously, both of you guys have massive user bases. And then they can start playing your game instantly, even if your game has elements which are securitized, because they've already been through KYC. These guys are effectively the merchant of record, which is very payments lingo, but it means that effectively they've abstracted away all of the responsibility/liability of actually conducting activities with that user. Now, the last thing I'll say on this is that that's all well and good when you're dealing with DeFi or DEXs, where it probably is a security. You're expecting yield, you're expecting appreciation of assets, whatever it may be. I disagree with Gensler for many reasons, but at the same time, there is a point there that there is a tangible risk. But in gaming, and think about traditional gaming, are you ever asked for your driver's license when you play, World of Warcraft? No, of course you're not. And there's a reason for that, is because it's clearly not a security. So I think right now there's actually a lot of additional friction in gaming, specifically in Web3, because everyone goes to the traditional on-ramp approach, which means that user almost definitely is going through some level of KYC via the on-ramping partner. And it's actually just not necessary at all. It's a digital item in-game if you're selling something that's linked to that ecosystem. Again, the caveat to that is it fungible? Is that an NFT I can take and sell on OpenSea? Well, now it may not be a financial service, but there is a tangible money laundering risk. Because if I've got someone's stolen credit card, I'm go onto that game, I'm going to mint an NFT, I'm going to put it on OpenSea for whatever, 5 ETH, pay for it in fiat using that stolen credit card, voila, that's money laundering. So there's always like a graduated scale on when you do or don't, but I think that's one of the mistakes being made in Web3 gaming today, is that we're adding a lot of friction, whereas if you just want to get people into your gaming ecosystem and you don't expect there to be a yield generating part of it, is no DeFi element, the NFTs are locked to the system or are like distinctly not investable assets. The MiCA regulation in Europe spells this out really clearly, that NFTs are not financial products for the vast majority. Then I think you can actually skip that step, and there will be a more streamlined Apple Pay-esque version where you'll be able to get people into your ecosystems that much faster if they're a net new customer.
Abhay, Daryl.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's really 3 questions, right? So the first question is do you really need it for gameplay? And for the most part, I think the answer is no. And if the answer is no, the question is, do you want to take on the responsibility of doing KYC? The second question is, do you see an opportunity by providing KYC? And this would probably be applicable to something like, Bradley was talking about. I can see Microsoft taking that approach. I can see maybe even Apple taking that approach if they were a little more Web3 friendly, that is. And for them, it's more of an opportunity and providing a platform-based kind of KYC approach and maybe providing enhanced gameplay because of that, or allowing for certain features or actions to take place in their kind of ecosystem in a differentiated way. And the third question is, do you have to do it, right? And that would apply to companies like us, MoonPay. If we end up working with folks, what we would be focused on is thinking through their gameplay, thinking through at what point exactly do you really need KYC. And in most places, it doesn't actually have to be in the game at all. It can be when you enter and exit the game, right? And more so on the exit when funds are leaving the game ecosystem. When funds are coming in, funds can come through various different sources. They don't necessarily always have to come through fiat. If it's fiat, you KYC. If it's a swaps transaction from a pre-funded wallet that you have, maybe you don't need to KYC. And having that kind of really nuanced approach of when do you really have to KYC applies to companies like us. Generally, I think, ideally, if you can use some type of, ZK technology to figure out a way to, almost like security clearance levels, like there's certain actions that you can do at certain levels. And, if you're obviously trying to take out an excess amount of money from an ecosystem or value from an ecosystem, maybe, and if you're unclear on regulation, it could be tricky waters and that might need enhanced KYC, but that might not apply to somebody who's just trying to, swap into some other token or something like that. So I think it's a nuanced kind of, and very specific to the actual gameplay.
Yeah, well, I imagine someone in the audience just got a great idea for a startup, so they have you to thank, Abhay. Daryl, Coinbase, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think big plus one to both of what these gentlemen said. I think progressive KYC is something that needs to be considered here. I think at Coinbase, for example, we have a fairly extensive KYC and onboarding process. And I think that makes sense for the trading use case where a user gets the question of, hey, do you have any family or relatives that sit on the boards of publicly traded companies? But I think for a mass casual gamer, even if I put myself in that situation, I'm a pretty pathetic gamer, but if I were to go through that onboarding flow just to purchase an NFT asset or to maybe pay out into an NFT asset that I've earned from grinding in the game, like I'm just gonna rage quit and never come back to that game. So I think it needs to be, purpose built for gaming folks. And I think at Coinbase, we're actually looking at this problem quite extensively because we've collected quite a bit of KYC information from the millions of users that we onboarded. And maybe there's a better way that we can utilize this information and better service developers in the ecosystem that may need some form of KYC, right? And don't necessarily want to do it themselves. So we're looking into maybe an identity and attestation platform, and that's like a simple API that if you're looking to onboard a Coinbase user and you just need bits and pieces of that information, like their age, for example, or even just the fact that they're a real user and not a bot, like we expose that endpoint and that data point really simply because we've done the hard work of collecting it. And I think that's one way that we can help the ecosystem grow in a way that's less onerous for the user.
Yeah, I think I love all of your perspectives on this. It's definitely one of the issues that needs to have some kind of a solution at scale. Obviously, at early starts for a lot of these games, they won't be under that kind of scrutiny, but building that into the foundation, I think, at launch through some kind of lightweight, frictionless product, if we can get there, that's obviously the dream. So it's definitely an area of focus. I imagine there's some infrastructure builders out there that might be exploring that.
We just have to wait for decentralized identity. Then it's fine.
I think sort of just a broad question. From a product perspective, how do you imagine the user experience, that UX, evolving from the current state of things? Bradley?
Sorry, I always wait for you to prompt me. Well, I said it at the very opening, so I'm not going to I will repeat it, screw it. This is a short sentence. But there's a huge delta between the best e-commerce experiences in Web 2 in terms of friction and UX versus what we see today. I do think, that Apple Pay, Google Pay, I look at my phone, the transaction's complete. It's kind of hard to beat that in terms of friction and security, biometrics, and everything else that goes into it. But I do think that sort of technology could also be overlaid with a MoonPay experience or a Coinbase experience. I just think more broadly, well, actually, no, I'm going to pass it on. I'll let these guys talk because this is, again, it's more in your field.
Yeah, I mean...
I told you you're going to have to carry me through this panel, so...
I mean, just my 2 cents on this is, because we're at a Web3 conference, right? I think I'll probably modify a question and maybe take it in a direction of what Web3 can uniquely unlock in UX and gameplay, and something let's say what Dark Forest is building, incredibly exciting, right? Where you don't necessarily need to see the entire gaming ecosystem, the game world per se, and there's UGC being created, and that itself is, there's ZK technology behind, how much you get to see versus how much the other person is creating. I think that's really, really exciting, and I'll throw in the buzzword for good measure. You throw in AI there, and you could see a world that is, an executable file basically spawning out a new world completely, and users engaging and creating, and maybe getting rewarded for certain attribution to what they create. I think that's really exciting. From the other UX angle, which I think I'm really excited about, is also specifically as it relates to when it comes to the bridging of the on-world and the online and the offline identities. I think reputation scoring is interesting, and less so from a fraud perspective, but more so from how do you translate reputation from a certain community into a different community, maybe a related IP franchise. I think that could be really interesting. Apple tried to do something like that, but it really didn't get the buy-in because of the nature of the ecosystem that Apple has. I think Web3 can actually do something really interesting there.
Daryl?
Yeah, I guess I tend to think of this question from the perspective of what I would want as a gamer. And I think the ideal user experience for me would be crypto and Web3. And I know many folks say this. I really do think this is the ideal user experience, which is that abstracted away as much as possible. So regardless of the game that I'm playing, whether it's a shooter or even something that's mobile, hyper casual, I just don't really want to write down my C phrase, authenticate a transaction every single time, have to do onerous KYC. I just want that removed so it doesn't interrupt my immersion into the game and the loop that I'm in as a player and a gamer. That said, I do think that in order to really integrate Web3 gaming and to scale some of the crypto primitives, you do need to abstract away the elements of Web3, but also still show the player and the gamer why it's important that Web3 is involved, right? Why it's important to have a wallet, why it's important to own this NFT that you can then resell on secondary markets and do so easily. So I think it's a balance of both. Maybe they don't need to write down the C phrase, but they still need to understand that with this NFT, this game asset, this avatar that lives on chain, that there's benefits that comes with that, right? And these rewards that they're accruing, they can sell pretty easily, which they can't necessarily do in a Web2 only environment. So I think a balance of the two would be ideal.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think, this industry has benefited immensely from the success of the firms you guys work for. And I think part of that success is due to this really successful education and bringing people into it, reducing those frictions. I'm curious, and Daryl, you sort of started with this. I'd love to know, obviously there's a lot of Web3 builders in the space. Are there any best practices that you think, you'd be able to share that really reinforce and lower those barriers, maybe from a UX or a UI perspective or just a marketing, you can sort of take that wherever you want. Bradley, I don't know if you have anything to say on this one, since you provide a lot of the infrastructure, but.
Well, it was touched upon in some of the other points as well, which is friction probably has to exist at some point if your game has fungible elements to it. And a lot of the attraction of Web3 gaming is that potentially it can. That's kind of cool. It creates a new dimension to gaming. But kick the can, as in you don't have to do heavy onboarding KYC up front. Look where the risk, the AML, whatever takes place. It's, as Abhay said, it's on the off-ramp. So it's a really simple piece of advice, But when the first thing you want to do is when someone first sees the game, you want them to get involved in it as fast as possible. There's an easy way to do that, which is just minimize the sign-up requirements to literally the bare minimum. Maybe they have to link their wallet, maybe they don't. But whatever you're collecting today, anything that potentially relates to the security side of it, the KYC or this kind of thing, just push it to the very back when people off-ramp. I just think it's a pretty easy step that you can make.
Yeah.
It's almost like adopting the freemium model of gaming. Just get people playing, work out the economics later. And that's the point, is that the economics piece, the tokenomics, can be completely separate from the gameplay itself. Get them playing, then work out the engagement and the economics of it.
Sure. Abhay?
Yeah, I'm actually going to piggyback on that. I think, when you think about developing a game, like the core concepts, whether Web 2 or Web 3 remain the same, like think about the incentive structures, think about the kind of reward mechanism, think about the kind of psychology of it before you start thinking about the tokenomics of it. And regardless of whether you have the best tokenomics incentive structure in there or not, sometimes I think there could be at least the first gen games in what we associate with play to earn. Essentially, a lot of it was tokenomics. Just as much as the other engagement aspects of it, and maybe in, let's call it Gen 2, hopefully you go back to a world where the tokenomics are almost when the game is ready, the tokenomics will appear versus the other way around.
Let me push back on that. Because it's a game. I've been a gamer my whole life. I'm not going to play a shitty game. And that's the problem in Web3, is that most of the games have been crappy. Axie had a really good incentive model, and that was great if you lived in and we said this earlier, if you're in Vietnam or the Philippines and your alternative is to go work on a farm where they have snakes literally in the grass, or you can sit on your computer and grind out this terrible game and make money, they're going to do that because it's incentives. Humans operate on incentives. Crypto is all about game theory. But I think when we're talking about onboarding millions, billions of users, the best games are the ones that are played the most. I do think that tokenomics can be tweaked on the back end, and I also think that it doesn't always have to be about incentives. You could just have a crypto element or a blockchain element to your game that is the platinum trophy that you can then export and flex or whatever. It doesn't always have to be about a get-rich-quick scheme, about a native token. Sometimes I just think that blockchain is a ledger. It doesn't have to involve finances. It could be an inventory of in-game items. I mean, there's lots of different ways I think we could approach this. You could also have a completely different third-party marketplace, which is where all the tokenomics takes place for NFT resales, for example, and the game is just a game built fully Web 2. And I think that's the thing, is it doesn't have to be binary one or the other. So I get what you're saying, that yes, of course, the incentive model is incredibly important if the game has a financial element, but I just question why the game needs a financial element innately. I think games, at their core, need to be fun.
No, I think we're saying the same thing. I'm thinking about the financialization of games being maybe a maybe good for Gen 1, but as we go towards Gen 2 and Gen 3, maybe the financialization doesn't necessarily have to take the front and center kind of.
Yeah, and if we just do fun games, then we're just repeating what Web 2's already done, so it probably does need a bit of secret sauce anyway.
Well, we're sort of out of time. Daryl, any last comment?
Yeah, I see the timer there, so I'll keep it really short. I think we're objectively in a bear market right now, and I think the best practice, because Coinbase, we're not gaming experts, so we're not going to tell you how to build a game. We don't know how to do that. We're not going to pretend to be experts there. I think the best practice that we've taken from our 10-year history is build for the user, build in the bear market. I think the best teams and the best products build through that, and once the cycle comes back, we'll kind of all benefit. So just keep building.
I love ending it on a high note. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.